But let me go ahead and officially welcome everybody since we've just passed that half hour. Welcome to June's LED session. And for those of you that this might be your first LED session, LED stands for Leadership, Education, and Development. And these topics range a wide gamut of subject matter. Sometimes it is specific to ECC, and sometimes it is more broad focused, hoping to reach not just a broader audience, but reach you on another level. And this month, we're specifically focusing on navigating grief and loss, and that's something that touches everyone. Unfortunately, it is something that happens to everyone, that they experience. Whether it has happened to you with a close friend or loved one recently in the past, or maybe something in the future that you have to deal with. It's something that we all benefit from understanding what we can expect of ourselves, what we can expect of the world around us as well. There are different sides of grief and loss that we wanted to address. I'm going to get to sort of part one, part two here in just a moment, but just to kind of give some background for those of you who may not know, I recently went through a loss. My mother passed away at the beginning of this year. And in going through that loss and navigating those feelings and sharing that with the folks that I work with and, friends and additional family members, it came about that a lot of us are in that same boat. We've experienced loss. Unfortunately, within the ECC family, there has been an increased amount of loss of loved ones or close friends. And it's something that we are unfortunately having to navigate together. So it heightened the import of bringing in someone who could help us understand not just the emotions that we're feeling, but the things that we can expect because, and I don't want to step on Robin's toes. I want to make sure she has the opportunity to kind of go into the subject matter as well.
Oh, you're fine. You're good.
But there's certainly an emotional component of navigating grief and loss. And then there's more of that practical component too. There are things legally that we have to deal with. There are things that financially may have to be dealt with. We wanted to split up this information into these two parts, one that focused more on that emotional side of grieving and loss, and one that focused more on the tools, the resources that we can use and that we can prepare for the loss of a loved one or a close friend, family member. So this session in particular, this is that first part. I hope everyone will help me welcome Robin. Robin is the founder of Soul Moxie, and she is also a leadership coach. She has been beneficial in helping us to understand more about emotional intelligence in the past through one-on-one coaching sessions and leadership development sessions. And I'm excited to welcome her here today to help us navigate this first session within navigating grief and loss. Robin, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. And Sally, you are just so well spoken.
Well, thank you.
I always love listening. She's so fluid. It's a great intro. So thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, today we will kind of look at just like this overlay of a few different components that tie into grief and loss. A lot of it falling under the umbrella of just navigating uncertainty, because the whole experience is just from start to finish. There's so much unknown, so much uncertainty, so much where we feel out of control. And so, some tools that kind of get pulled into my leadership practice as well as my own personal life will be things that we'll kind of talk about today. So hopefully you will end up with some takeaways as well as some potential opportunities that you see for yourself of some things that you could put in place or practice to prepare. Because that's the one thing that we can do, even if we don't know it's coming, we can still prepare the tools to kind of be ready for when something comes. I'll go ahead and share a screen now. And if you have questions, I have a couple screens working, so there's a chance that I may not see it, so Sally, I know, will help me, but I'll try and keep an eye on the chat or for any raised hands. So, and just a reminder too, I know this will stay housed in the ECC University, but otherwise I just ask that you just be kind around intellectual property and know that there's some proprietary ideas in here that I've created, and 25 years of coaching kind of put things together. So just honor that, and just please don't share it outside, but I'm happy to do this conversation with lots of other people in lots of different places, so just let me know. Okay, so jumping into this, I guess one thing I would love to know from people is just to have you start thinking about, has grief or loss or uncertainty touched your life this year? And feel free to just pop in the chat, like just yes. Yes, I've had either grief or loss. And I'm also expanding this a little bit too, because for sure, grief covers a loss of friend or family or pet, but it also touches on areas, maybe it's something about a career or some big change that we're having in relationships. So grief has many, many layers. Yes, I'm seeing a lot of people have it's touched them on some level this year, and I'm sorry for all the loss that many of you have experienced or maybe are going through or are waiting on right now, because you can see maybe some of it is coming. So thank you, and I'm sorry for you just going through that. And I guess one thing is just this helps us also realize this is life, that we are all going through this at different times. So we're in company of other people who really understand and who are really kind of practicing this as well. So I would love to I would actually love to start with just taking a moment just to get present. I don't know about anyone else, but the last few days have been really crazy busy. And this is actually a tool that you can use to help you navigate uncertainty, to help you navigate loss and grief. And it is just taking a moment to breathe and get present. So just go ahead, and if you're driving, just obviously keep your eyes open, but otherwise, if you're at a desk or somewhere where you can close your eyes, just take a minute and like get rid of all the external stimuli and just close your eyes and just focus on your breath for a moment and get present and see if there's anywhere in your body that you're holding tension. Are you tight in your belly? Are you tight in your chest or your neck or your shoulders? Feel free to kind of do some shoulder shrugs or kind of let your head roll to the front and side to side, just to kind of loosen up if you've been a desk jockey most of the day. So just take a moment to breathe and let yourself be here. And let yourself just notice how you feel in your body, and notice if there's anywhere in your body where you just feel any kind of sensation, whether it's tension or whether it is fatigue or anything like that. So just a quick snapshot of just how you're feeling in this moment. And then just take a couple more breaths and come back. And we'll loop back to that idea of using breath work and just a pause, having little pauses here and there in our day and our week, because sometimes when we're going through uncertainty, when we're going through loss, we're so busy. There's so much going on, especially if it is a loss, it's a disruption of sort of our normal routines, and everything falls away except for this thing. And oftentimes we just lose track of ourselves as well. So the more that we can stay connected with our own bodies and our own experience, the better. I also want to just share that, there are many different ways that people experience grief and loss. And I kind of put grief and loss in this category with like weddings and birth and, major life changes. We don't really have training of how to navigate and handle them. And so there's really no norm. And you will probably have already experienced in your own life of seeing how people go through it differently. Some people may have unusual responses where they laugh, which feels really bad to probably both them because they don't know what to do. And some people may have just kind of like traditional emotions around it. So just remember that everyone's experience is different. We all are going to process it differently. And it's really important to make space for all of the feelings. I had my dear friend last May, a year ago May, lost her mom to a long battle of cancer, and she has one brother. And maybe you can feel free to put in the chat if you have had different experiences from other people in your family during loss, and some of it was maybe even surprising. But she was going through the experience of trying to help navigate with her mom, getting her into hospice, figuring out that it was time to stop chemo because it was just really not helping her. And so my friend was really kind of preparing, like she could see that this was happening. Her brother, on the other hand, as well as her stepfather, were just in denial. They were not there. They could not see that she was really close and that it was almost time for her to be completing her life. And so there's no right way. However, I will say that the more that we can be in touch with what's true and what's really happening in the moment, the better we can do. So after her mom passed, her brother just really struggled because he had not mentally prepared at all. He just had not allowed himself to believe that this was happening. And so it created more pain for him. So is there anyone that has had that experience where you were going through it and someone else that was close to you was having a very different experience? And if so, feel free to come off of mute or to type it in the chat. And this is, again, just to help us remember that no two people experience grief and loss in the same way. I don't see any hands raised. Okay.
Robin, if I may jump in, I'll just
Yes,
share
please.
sometimes personal stories are a little bit harder, but I feel like I've told everybody who'll listen sort of my story, so I'll share it here
Right.
too. With mine in particular, my mother was here in Colorado in a nursing home, and the rest of my family is out of state. And so their perspective of what she was going through was quite a bit different. It wasn't as real to them. And then when she did pass, and I was dealing with the majority, if not all, of settling everything and getting everything taken care of. They experienced it what felt like almost on a more intense level because they weren't here to have kind of that say and to be a part of sort of her final days. And
Right.
so I found that really interesting, and just to be able to step back and because you ask yourself, like, why are you acting like this? You weren't here. But realizing that their grief looked different because their experience was so much
Yeah.
more different than mine.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to kind of see it unfold, whereas when you're coming in at the end, and I think that's one thing that I don't have on here as essential reminders on this list is allow for grace. Just really give yourself grace. The third bullet on here is, release judgment and allow yourself to be messy, but also insert grace for other people because there are times where people, I found that my dad passed away. It'll be 8 years this summer. And I remember afterwards, like I was one of those people who wanted to talk about it. I wanted people to ask me and no one did. Like people, not no one, but it was very rare. And, I wanted them to ask me so I would have the opportunity to talk about it and to process, but everyone does it differently. So one of the things in here too is allowing grace for others, allow ourselves to be messy, and remember there is no timeline. It is a personal journey. Like there could be someone who recovers quickly and they move through grieving in a very different way, and other people who get sidelined for much longer. And it just depends on the person, the relationship, and the tools, and their experience in this situation, all of it. And we can also even have grief before the loss. So you may know that it's coming, and you start grieving in advance, and that is also normal. I mean, there's no abnormal in this process. And grief and loss is difficult for us all, and we can take steps to ready ourselves for the unexpected. So I shared the story. I want to share a little video just about grief and grieving, and then we're actually going to start moving into some tools and framework a little bit.
How does the brain's response to grief compare with its response to other intense emotions like love or joy or fear?
I think it's very helpful to distinguish between grief and grieving. So grief is another human emotion. A wave of grief comes over us when we're aware that we've had a really profound loss. That's our reaction to it. That natural response is what we call grief. And that really happens in the moment. Grieving, on the other hand, is the way that grief changes over time. You would have to ask the same person what their grief is like on more than one occasion to figure out what's changing. Grief is never going to go away. It's just a normal human reaction. Grieving means that over time, those waves of grief tend to be less intense. They tend to be less frequent. They become more familiar. And eventually, we discover how to comfort ourselves in those moments.
Okay, so again, grief is more the reaction to the loss, and grieving is the way that grief changes over time. And again, it will look different for everyone, and we have to just be open to that experience as much as possible. Meanwhile, there are some things that we can do to ready ourselves. In the end, we're never going to be completely ready, because it's still hard. It's going to be hard no matter when it happens, how much preparation, chances are it's still going to be hard and really demanding. Some of the things that can help us, though, to navigate the uncertainty of it and overall loss is, first of all, mindfulness. Mindfulness is really being present. It's present moment awareness. So being aware of what's going on inside of ourselves, what's going on in the situation, noticing how we are showing up in the world. Some of us may shut down, some of us may distract ourselves, some of us may shift into a negative mindset and kind of lash out or judge or be frustrated with other people's behavior. And most of the time, the more that we can just be mindful and be in present moment awareness with how we are navigating this, it's really helpful. And it's a practice that we can cultivate every day. We can practice mindfulness every day. So that is one way that we can prepare and start to cultivate the tool. All of these tools are things that I would relate to going to the gym. And we might start and we might feel that our muscles are really weak and we don't know how to do it, or it's too hard to do and we can only do it for short bursts. That's okay. Little by little, the more that we practice how many ever of these tools, the stronger we will feel and the more that we can rely on them when we need them. So it's kind of like it creates this container for us that when we just are really struggling, we can lean on it. And within that is also intention. Intention is really purposeful action. So when I was going through the loss of my dad, it was unexpected. He had this cough for a couple weeks, ended up in the hospital, which was a first for him. And my mom was exhausted, so I decided to travel east to be with both of them, but also just to support my mom because I could tell she was tired. She was, sleeping at the hospital sometimes. And once I got there, I could really feel that my dad was not coming out of the hospital. And so from that point on, I just really tried to be intentional about the way that I showed up, the way I showed up for myself, for my mom, for my brother. I really took a strong stance with my brother and I said, you need to get here, because he was in Connecticut and he was thinking my dad would be okay, but I just knew that this was not a temporary situation, that this was going to kind of shift in a direction where this was the completion. And another tool that is really helpful is presence. So we've all had the experience of, I mentioned this in the EQ course that we did, but we all have had the experience of being in the company of someone who is really present. They look us in the eye, they listen, they reflect back what we hear or what they hear. They are engaged and curious and interested in really participating in a conversation. And we can show up that way as well. And whether it is sitting with a loved one as they're starting to make their transition, or as they're just in a position where they're sick and we know that they're not getting well, just being there for people, especially because does anyone feel helpless during this process? Anyone else? You can just type yes in the chat if you have felt helpless in these positions where you wish there was something that you could do, but really the best thing that we can do is show up and be present for the people we care about. And then that brings us to the next element, which is preparation. So we can't necessarily know when loss or uncertainty will happen. We can identify, sorry, extra word there, we can identify and prep our tools for when it arrives. So we know at some point in our lives we're going to have loss and have grieving, and we may not know when it will happen, but the more we can kind of prepare. I would be curious at this point, before I move on to the next slide, if anyone would want to add into the chat, like what tools that we've mentioned so far or in general were helpful for you as you've navigated uncertainty, as you've navigated loss. Any tools that were really helpful for you? Well,
Yeah, I'm going to come off of mute again, and I don't want to hog this conversation, so somebody else interrupt me, please. But I just wanted to add with mine, because it wasn't 100% certain of when she would go, but because she was in a nursing home, we knew that it was imminent. We just didn't know exactly when. There was a certain amount of preparation that could be done, and I really leaned on that, and I'm really glad that I did, because looking back on it, no matter how much preparation I did in the moment when I got that call, I don't really remember a lot of what happened within sort of the hour and a half of getting that call. So I'm really thankful that I made steps ahead of time to be as prepared as possible, and that I checked in with myself and others as I was sort of driving to her, and things like that. That was my biggest help.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, there are logistical things we can prepare for, and then there are the emotional pieces. So on this slide, we can see preparing for loss, things that you can do to be quote unquote ready, is really work on, I'm going to jump ahead to a slide here. So emotions, develop skill to identify and feel, allow all of your emotions. This one I found online, Hoffman, I think it's like Hoffman Institute. And one thing I want to direct your attention to is body sensations. Some of us may be really connected to our emotions, where it's pretty easy for us to identify what emotions are happening. Sometimes you may have to start by paying attention to body sensations. So whether you're achy or breathless or feeling frozen or hard or shaky or, itchy, jumpy, some of these things we might feel in our body, and we didn't necessarily know that is an indicator that there is an emotion there that is wanting and needing some kind of expression. And the more that we can pay attention to our bodies and start noticing some of these signals that our bodies are giving us, then we can also start looking at what emotion it might be conveying to us. Because sometimes if people die or are in the process of dying, we might feel angry. And the anger underneath could be a sense of helplessness. It could be combined with sadness and frustration or irritation that they didn't take better care of themselves. Like whatever it is, there's so many. It's very rare that there's just like one emotion at a time with any big event in life, any uncertain event in our lives. It's usually just this stacking of emotions, but the more that we can start to pull them apart, the more then that we can be present with it, relax our body, and let ourselves feel it. So emotions are a big one. And it is a skill to develop. Mindfully getting complete. So it's never too late to get complete, whether you choose to do some forgiveness work with a person, whether you choose to, find one of those kits. I haven't mentioned in one of the upcoming slides, so we'll get there in a moment, but, one of those kits where you can, collect memories, for that person, for anyone to read in the future as a keepsake. And then learning, research, formal prep. So some of that will tie in more to probably the second wave of this series that Sally had mentioned, where it's more of like the logistical pieces. And then a piece that I am just calling the uncertainty toolkit, which you can use really in any situation where you have uncertainty, and it works with grief and loss, but any kind of uncertainty in general. And that would be, I'm going to jump down to here, and then I'll go back to the other one in a second. So part of the uncertainty toolkit is focusing on what you can do, what you can control, and then letting go of the rest. Part of this process is letting go. Letting go of the person, letting go of a dream that we may have had, of a wish, letting go of possibilities and things that we had hoped had happened, letting go of anger, frustration, resentment. There's all different layers. In my experience, the more that we can let go, the better. And, I think sometimes too, when we are losing someone, we may even have a mix of emotions about how we feel about them dying. We may be relieved. We may be actually kind of glad because they were suffering, which then maybe makes us feel conflicted or kind of guilty, like how can I feel glad that they are dying? But, again, there's no right or wrong emotion. It's just important to honor it and take space for it. So through uncertainty, if we can have daily anchors, habits, practices, choices, self-care practices, this one is a priority, especially during that process of loss, because it's very easy for us to lose track of taking care of ourselves. And so can someone type in the chat or come off mute and just share a habit that is a healthy anchor that helps you when you're going through times of challenge? Like, what is something that keeps you steady, stable, whether it's meal prep or going for a walk or talking with a friend or sitting with a cup of coffee? Does anyone have one that you can either pop in the chat or just share? Come on. Anyone? We have a quiet group today. I don't want to just keep talking at you. All right. I'll keep moving, but feel free just to pop it in and I'll keep my eye on the chat. So habits, practices, choices, self-care. And self-care is everything from making sure that you're drinking water to eating. Oftentimes when we're grieving, some people eat everything, some people eat nothing. So just finding what a middle ground could feel like. And the more that you have these habits ready in advance, the more it's part of your lifestyle, the easier it will be to employ it during times of challenge. Mindset. Choose the thoughts that best support your process. And what that translates to is, as we're navigating uncertainty, we can either go to the place where we have scarcity thinking or critical thinking, or, we get into a negative spiral of what's going to happen, how will you, what can you do without this person or whatever it is. But our mindset really makes a big difference. So you can be in charge of what you want your mindset to be on a daily basis. And the more practice you have on directing your thoughts and choosing your thoughts, the more that it helps kind of ground us when we're going through difficult times. Another piece is gathering information and being open to the truth and learning. So during this process, again, with the story where I shared with my friend and her brother, Like she was really trying to gather all the information about the truth, that her mom was exhausted, that she was not having a good quality of life, that she was not benefiting from chemo, that it would probably serve her to be off of it and she would have a better quality of life for this final phase, that she was not getting better. Whereas on the flip side, her brother was not embracing that. And so sometimes the truth is hard. It's really hard to hear what's true. It's hard to accept it. It's hard to be with it. And it's really important. Let go, let go, let go. Again, letting go of our attachment. I don't know about anyone else. And again, feel free to pop it in the chat. Does anyone else, when you are stressed, lean in to try and control things? Anyone? Maybe just me? So when I'm in those places of, oh yes, did I see a hand raised? Sarah, I think it was. You can just jump in if you're there.
I think Sarah was agreeing. We've got a lot of agreement in the chat for sure.
Okay. Got it. Oh, I'm seeing it now. That's so funny. It didn't scroll down. Okay. I have a little catch up to do here because I missed part of this chat. Positive outlet, journaling, reading book, gym, yes. Cleaning house. Sometimes that works. You can come on over. All right. And yes, the anger part is that's real. That's very real, especially depending on the circumstances. There was this great forgiveness practice that I was doing a therapy session with my therapist at one point because there was some stuff I was going through, and she gave me this great exercise. So you might even be able to look online. And the anger, is helpful because sometimes we just want to sit with it and we'll realize that there's other emotions kind of tangled in there as well that need a space for expression. So, and fishing, I love that. Okay. Okay, and then one of my favorite pieces, which let me see it because I feel like I skipped a slide here and I want to make sure I pop back to it, is mindful loss. So before we go on to that last step of the uncertainty toolkit, mindful loss is moving through loss and grief with intention and meaning. So, sometimes it seems senseless. Sometimes it seems, like we just want to check out. We don't want to feel it. We want to, maybe we lean too hard into substance or alcohol because we don't want to feel all of it. However, there is this beautiful opportunity to really imbue this part of life, the life cycle, with meaning, to bring in more of a sense of connection, to bring in more love, forgiveness, understanding, compassion, letting go of things that got in the way from us being able to have a relationship. So say everything. Say everything that you need to say. Love, forgiveness, gratitude. I mean, obviously, maybe don't say all the hurtful things that you may need to, although maybe sometimes you do. Maybe you just need to say like some of that to get it off your chest. And then maybe you can move to a place of forgiveness and get there in time to share that as well. Take time, make memories, be present for moments. I can remember there was a book about a woman who was dying of cancer, and she took extra time off with her family, and the things that mattered the most were like sitting out on the front porch watching a sunset, like just these little moments, not these big epic trips and amazing things, but just little moments together to be present with one another. And then taking time for reflection, big picture, purpose and meaning. Like sometimes death makes no sense. Sometimes we may be upset and frustrated because it seems like why this person? And I don't think any of us really have those answers, but the more that we can drop into making meaning of it, intentionally taking time to make it mean something. When my dad was passing, he went into not hospice, what is it? It's like the comfort palliative care. And I basically had the honor and challenge of talking him out like with a meditation. So the whole way through, I was just telling him to breathe and, just supporting him to be able to let go. And that was so powerful. And it's something I will never forget. So, we can take time for these little moments and they make a big difference. Does anyone want to share anything in the chat of like a way that you have made meaning or that you could make meaning? Whether it's taking time with someone, being present, doing something together. And also on here is a resource. There's this one called Memorygram, and that is one of the ones where you can kind of pull together ideas and create a book, like a memory book. Learn to let go of things you can't control. Yes, that's important. Any other ways of making meaning? All right, I'm going to pop back to this slide. Support posse and team. So, try to do lunch every week with elderly mother. That is lovely. And filler pills. Yes, the practical and the heart. Nice. It's a good combo. Support posse. So what I mean by this, I'm just coming through, like this past fall, I had a brush with cancer. And I would say that my support posse was one of the most powerful things that I could have for myself. There was one point a number of years ago, many years ago before I got married, where a relationship was ending. And it wasn't until it was ending that I realized that I had completely no support system. Like I had collapsed fully into this relationship to the exclusion of all others. Like I had lost my friendships with girlfriends. I just had not put energy into it. And that was a powerful learning for me. So ever since, for the past 20 years, I've really made friendships and staying connected with people a priority. And during, all of the uncertainty of cancer and, luckily it was a minor, it's like the best case scenario when I went through it. So it wasn't, years of treatment, but having support people that I could text, that I could call and have 10-minute phone conversations with, as well as like my whole team. So whether it's like a therapist or a doctor or a physical therapist, all the different things. So really take time, like this is home play that you could do, is make a list of who is my support posse, and then the support posse would be kind of more, the people on your inner circle, friends, family, therapists, support group, pets. Team is maybe the next circle out, experts, teachers, doctors, service providers, healthcare, PT, massage, all of that. So really look at who those people are and be ready. Build those relationships now or when you're in between challenging times so that you can be there for them during hard times. And then that you have support when you need it. Because again, this is like a universal truth in life. We all go through loss. We all experience death at some point, and we can be there for each other. And you can also kind of build time and teach people how specifically to support you. You can say, I don't need any advice, but can I just talk? And you can listen and you can encourage me or hug me or whatever. So just think about who your support posse is and how you can nurture it and expand it, perhaps. Okay, let's see. So let's look at this and then maybe in the chat, an opportunity into action. So whether it has to do, I'll finish this thought and then I'll pop back to some of the tools. What are a few opportunities I see for myself that I can do to start to prepare? What do I need to let go of to allow myself to move through uncertainty, grief, loss mindfully? So I'm going to pop back through the slides real quickly. And remember, grief and loss, making space for it, giving ourselves some grace, mindfulness, awareness, intention, presence, preparing. So looking through here and just seeing like, what are your opportunities? And feel free to pop something in the chat of something that you want to try on, you want to practice, you see as an opportunity, something you want to let go of, saying everything you need to say. I would love to actually hear just a couple voices. I know 45 minutes goes by really quickly, but I would love to hear from a couple people just of like what stood out to you, what's a takeaway or something that you know you liked or want to practice. So it could be a takeaway like, oh, I like this idea, or it could be something personal like something you want to work on. Anyone open to sharing? Because again, we all go through this.
Yeah, for myself, I lost an uncle around Thanksgiving time, and my aunt is navigating, living by herself, and so even though I don't live in the same state, I'm trying to be there for her more, just calling her more often. So this is more about like, being there as somebody else's, support
Yeah,
posse.
yeah.
But I'm also doing the same thing for myself because, like you mentioned, I feel like, I've kind of let some friendships go by the wayside, and now I have some more opportunities to rekindle and strengthen those relationships, especially since I don't live near any family. So, building those that support system in my immediate vicinity location is, becoming more important to
Yeah.
me now. So,
Yeah. Well, it's a great awareness to have. Thank you so much for sharing, Catherine.
Yeah,
Anyone
I
else
agree
want
with
to?
Catherine on that. I have, a few years ago, I lost one of my good friends, and his wife, was really devastated. So, I mean, people like that, even if I'm not as close to her as I was to her husband, I struggle to keep in touch and support them as well. It's always hard when you get busy, and especially, like Catherine said, if they're not close to you physically, but it's
Mhm.
important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is, that kind of shows sort of like this collaborative process, right? Is it helps us both. When we reach out to people who are grieving, we're grieving in different ways. Thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else want to share something that stood out or a tool? You can just jump right in.
I wanted to add, I know you mentioned about the book of memories or something along those lines, but there's several different businesses out there. I actually have a knockbox, by the way, and I'm setting that up
Nice.
for my family.
Nice.
That's an important one if people aren't aware of it. It basically collects all of your information so that whoever takes over to close out your affairs, everything's in one place for them. I recommend it to everybody.
Mhm.
The other thing is, I was recently looking at this service called Memento, where you actually sit down with someone who's still present and you have them tell stories, and it records their voice and creates a book as well as some codes to where you can actually hear their voice.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And maybe somehow we can, if you have other suggestions of those, send them to Sally and maybe she can somehow include it with the post and the resource. Thank you so much. Any other shares that people have? And I do have a page up now with a few books, and it looks like someone typed in Next of Kin by Dave Ramsey. Maybe that is another good one. Anyone else have a share? Yeah, Knockbox. That's right up here as well. And the link is up there as well. Well, I know that we are at our time, and I know it was like a big It's a very deep conversation that we were able to do kind of just highline and brush, but hopefully we can all see opportunities of ways that we can strengthen skills to help us navigate. And again, remember like this through the lens of any uncertainty. All of these tools can be used for any uncertainty. But thank you so much for being open, for sharing, for participating in the chat, even though I missed some of it because I didn't scroll. But thank you.